What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto accidentally drank a love potion and couldn't escape the Kunoichi's desire? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The sound of a key going into the lock followed by the opening of the door echoed through the dark apartment. Footsteps were heard going inside with the clicking of the light switch shortly after. Naruto closed the door and his eyes swept over the empty living room. "I'm home," his voice was heard without getting a response. He didn't expect a response because there never was one. But it was a habit he developed after he got his apartment when he entered the ninja academy. He had read somewhere that it was customary to say something like that when you got home. However, the lack of a response hit him tonight more than it ever had before. He took off his open-tipped sandals and went into the kitchen. He wasn't feeling really hungry, but he hadn't eaten since lunch, so he started boiling the water and took a cup of instant ramen, before sitting at his small table. What a night. What a day even. He had failed the Genin graduation exam for the third time in a row. For the third time in a row he had failed to become a full-fledged shinobi, a ninja of the village hidden in the leaves. And then Mizuki, one of the teachers at the academy, who had probably taken pity on him, had given him a second chance. Or so he had thought at least. Mizuki had told him that there was a secondary, make-up exam that tested all aspects of shinobi life. First, he had to sneak into the Hokage tower. It was the building where the village leader lived and conducted everyday business. It was to test his stealth and infiltration skills. Afterwards, he had to locate something called the Forbidden Scroll, which contained many of the village's secret jutsu, too. He had to take it, eliminate any opposition that he had found on the way and escape successfully. That had also been easy enough with the only real opposition coming from the old man Hokage, but Naruto had taken care of him with his ultimate technique. Finally, he had to find a secret place where he had to learn one jutsu from the scroll before he was found. Another easy task, even though the jutsu he had chosen was the hated clone technique. This one was different from the one the academy curriculum taught. While the academy jutsu only created an illusionary copy of himself, the one he learned from the scroll created a solid clone. It was supposedly a harder and more dangerous technique, but for some reason Naruto had learned it really quickly. That's when things had started going wrong. Iruka, one of the other academy instructors, had been the first to find him. He had told him that Mizuki was a traitor and that he had used him to steal the Forbidden Scroll. Afterwards, Mizuki himself had shown and revealed the mother of all secrets. Naruto was an orphan. He had no parents, no siblings, not even any friends, no one in the world who actually cared for him. He sometimes met with the old man Hokage and maybe there was an occasional trip to Ichiraku ramen with Iruka. But he couldn't really call them family. As if that wasn't bad enough, but for some reason everyone in the village hated him. Everyone, with some very little exceptions, would give him cold stares or would outright glare at him. They would ignore him and pretend he wasn't there. They would speak behind his back, thinking that he couldn't hear their harsh words. And worse, they would tell their children to treat him the same way. And tonight, thanks to Mizuki, he had finally found out why. Apparently, it was a huge village secret that nobody was allowed to tell him about. 12 years ago, on October 10th, also known as his birthday, the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked the village. The fourth Hokage had defeated the beast and had saved the village. Except you can't really kill the Kyuubi, you can only seal it into a person, preferably a newborn child. Unfortunately for Naruto, he had been the only newborn child available at the time. Everything after that revelation had become a blur. He had beaten Mizuki into a bloody pulp, after which he and Iruka had returned the Forbidden Scroll to the Hokage. Naruto had asked the old man many questions about the Kyuubi and what he was and had received some long-winded explanations he would think about at some later point in time. The whistling of the kettle tore Naruto from his musings and he stood up to grab it and prepare his dinner. He poured the hot water into the cup and put the lid back on. 3 minutes until dinner was done. He hated waiting for those 3 minutes. Instead, he thought of doing something productive and went into the bathroom to wash up quickly. A minute and a half was dedicated to that, followed by 30 seconds of changing clothes. That gave him a minute to spare, which he spent looking at the forehead protector with the leaf insignia on it. Getting promoted to Genin was definitely the highlight of the day. He had now officially made the first step to fulfilling his dream of becoming Hokage. The only thing that marred the happy occasion was the absence of someone to actually share his happiness with. In fact, he really wanted someone to talk to about some other things. Namely the fox. Sure, the old man had answered his questions and Iruka had given him some reassurances or whatever. But he didn't think they could really understand. The only people that could probably understand him and have any meaningful words were people like him. Other Jintubiki or something, Naruto and big words do not agree with each other. Right now, he really needed someone like that to tell him things would be alright. That he wasn't alone or that they really understood. But just his luck, he was the only Jinsuriki in Konohagakure. 4. The only one who could really understand him right now was himself. He had barely finished the thought and without even realizing it he had dropped the forehead protector and was already making the cross seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 5. His voice was barely a whisper and sounded alien to him, but it was his voice nonetheless. Because with a poof of smoke there was another him right before his eyes. Or so he thought. The person in front of him had his height. He also had the same blonde unruly hair with each strand of hair having its own opinion on the proper direction of growth. He had a round face with a slightly angular jaw and 3 whisker birthmarks on each cheek. He also wore his same orange tracksuit with blue on the shoulders and the waist, a white swirl with a tassel on the left side, a large white collar, orange pants and kunai holster on his right leg. On all those parameters it was definitely his Kage Bunshin. 6. Except the eyes. The eyes were completely wrong. While his eyes were bright blue with white sclera, the clone had red eyes with black sclera. Their most striking feature was the complete lack of pupils. Who are you? Naruto asked flabbergasted. Isn't it obvious? I'm your clone, you dimwit, answered his apparent clone. Hey, don't call me that, I'm not stupid, Naruto shouted, pointing a finger at his clone. Really? I think there's a whole village out there that would beg to differ. Not to mention your test scores, the clone replied smoothly, crossing his arms. Naruto was about to protest loudly again and even opened his mouth to shout but nothing came out. He simply looked at his clone before turning to the side and murmuring, "Figures, even my clones treat me like I'm nothing." "Oh," replied the clone, "and what did you expect?" "I don't know. Something else. A bit of comfort maybe? You're me. You should care." Naruto screamed with tears pooling at the corner of his eyes. "Of course I care," the clone blurted angrily, which made both of them freeze. The ensued silence wasn't long as the clone spoke again. "I may hate this village and everyone in it. I might even hold a large amount of annoyance for you. But I do care." Whatever things the clone expected as a reply, being hugged by Naruto wasn't one of them. "Hey," the clone said, annoyed, and tried to push his creator away. "Let go." "What are you doing?" But no matter how much he pushed, Naruto wouldn't let go. Hearing the sobs made him stop. The clone stood completely frozen, trying his best not to acknowledge his creator was crying. Even if they were different, it stirred the same emotions deep in him. But it was a losing battle, and after a bit the clone returned the embrace. Without the crying, of course. What a pathetic sight, the clone thought. They were so alone, they had to use the shadow clone technique to actually get a hug. It just reinforced the clone's hatred for the village and everyone in it. After a while Naruto's sobs disappeared and he asked, "So why are your eyes red if you're my clone? I thought you were supposed to be my exact representative. Repeat, copy or something." The clone dropped the embrace with no resistance this time before letting out a sigh. "All right, let's go to the kitchen and get the ramen before it gets cold. I'll explain while you eat." "Want me to make you ramen as well? If you're my clone, you should be hungry," Naruto asked while they were walking towards the kitchen. "And that's why it'd be a waste to give me food. I'm a clone, I'll disappear after a while," the clone said. "So, tonight's special, I became a genin. I'll make you one," Naruto said, happy at the prospect of having dinner with someone. Even if it was just a clone. Said clone was about to protest but then stopped. He was actually curious what would happen if he ate food. Was he even capable of eating food? Of digesting it and absorbing it? If he was a complete copy. Well, with some differences, but at least the body was a complete copy, then he should have a functioning digestive system. Wait, what the hell was he debating for? It was free ramen, of course he would eat. The clone mentally shook himself and sat on the table opposite Naruto. Now he had to wait for the blasted 3 minutes to pass. Naruto also decided to wait, even if his ramen was already ready. He figured it wouldn't be nice to start eating before his clone. After the 3 minutes had passed, Naruto clapped his hands and said, "Itadakimasu, 7, excitedly, while the clone echoed him with much less enthusiasm and volume. They both ate in silence, enjoying the taste of the food of gods that was ramen and, funnily enough, each other's company. So, Naruto was the first to speak after they had finished their respective meals. "What are you exactly?" The clone kept silent for a bit longer before sighing and scratching the back of his head. "I'm still your clone. Or more precisely, a clone of your hidden self." "My hidden self?" Naruto crossed his arms and tilted his head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Look, remember how you were feeling when you made me?" the clone asked, getting an uneasy nod from Naruto. "You felt completely alone and incredibly sad. Normally you hide those emotions. During the years you've hidden all those emotions every time one of those idiotic villagers glared at you or whispered behind your back. You bottled it all up." The clone looked Naruto directly in the eyes. "I am the result. I am all of those repressed emotions. I am your loneliness, your hatred towards the villagers. I am every single fake smile that was masking your pain." "What? I don't hate the village," Naruto shouted, but only got a snort from his clone. "Figures, you keep pretending like I don't exist. Just like how the villagers pretend you don't exist." Naruto reeled back, as if his face had been punched with the last statement. He just stared at the clone with wide eyes, unable to say anything, so the clone continued. "No matter how much you deny it or pretend I don't exist, I'm still there. Hidden deep in here." The clone touched Naruto's chest gently before continuing. "And I'll keep growing. I am everything about yourself that you try to ignore. So, I brought you out because of the way I was feeling while I used the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," Naruto said after a while. "That's right, I'm still a clone of you. Just a different aspect of your personality that's stronger in me. So even if I'm a clone, I'm still slightly different," the clone replied, and the two settled into silence once again. "Hey, wanna play something?" Naruto asked, producing a deck of cards out of somewhere. "What?" The clone's jaw fell. "You know, Ninja Beloti, Ninja Hearts, Ninja Poker," Naruto explained as he started shuffling the cards expertly. "Do I look like someone who enjoys playing card games?" the clone asked incredulously. "Well, you look like someone who has way too much fun setting things on fire. But that doesn't mean we can't play something," Naruto said, flipping cards around at very high speeds. "Besides, this is the first time I have someone at home. I'm sick of solitaire." The clone was about to retort with a particularly snarky remark but stopped himself. He was doing that a lot tonight. Yet he had to agree, he hated solitaire as well. Ninja poker sounded like a good idea at the moment. So he opted for a different remark. "Prepared to get creamed, loser," said the clone. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Oh, it's on." Rays of sunshine broke through the window and with the nasty accuracy they usually had to them hit Naruto right in his eyes. The blonde grumbled and threw his pillow at the offenders with a great deal of futility, since all he managed to accomplish was hit the window. He let out a sigh before he slowly rose in his bed. He yawned and blearily looked around the room and into his living room through the open door of his bedroom. He noted the distinct absence of his clone. The last thing he remembered was playing ninja poker before passing out around 3 o'clock in the morning. For a brief moment he wondered if it was all just a dream. If he was so lonely that he actually summoned a clone that had a different personality just to have some company after a crazy day. "Maybe I've started losing my mind," the blonde muttered. "That would imply actually having one in the first place." Numbskull, he heard a noise coming from next to him. Wide-eyed, he turned his head and saw the clone from last night lying on the bed shirtless. Not a second later Naruto let out a scream and fell off the bed, hitting his head hard. Through the stars that were dancing over his eyes he could hear the clone's loud and annoying laughter. "Oh God, you should have seen your face," the clone choked out and kept laughing. "What the hell are you doing in my bed?" Naruto managed after he got up. "I was sleeping until a while ago." "You have only one bed in the apartment, dimwit," the clone responded. "Why the hell are you shirtless?" Naruto asked. "Well, you had only one set of pajamas. Besides, I was interested to see your reaction and you didn't disappoint," the clone replied, giving Naruto a wink and getting off the bed. Naruto's eye twitched as he felt his whole body shiver with an unpleasant feeling. He knew the clone was making fun of him, but it was still unsettling. "You're a jerk." "Hey, I try my best." Thanks for noticing, the clone laughed again. Come on, go get washed up and let's get breakfast. We have things to discuss. Discuss? Naruto asked on his way to the bathroom. Talk about, the clone translated from the kitchen while he started making some toast. I knew that. Naruto shouted and started the shower. 10 minutes later both blondes were sitting on the table and silently eating. Naruto was about to drink from his carton of milk before he was stopped by the clone. Don't drink that, it's past the expiration date. Oh, Naruto said and put the carton on the table before he frowned. That meant only toast for breakfast. We need to get proper groceries, the clone said. It's fine, I still have ramen, Naruto said. We can't live only off of ramen. We should get other stuff like fruit and vegetables, the clone tried to reason. Ew! Naruto exclaimed and pointed an accusing finger at his clone, traitor. Hey, I represent everything you hate, including proper nutrition, the clone shrugged. Nutrition? Naruto asked, scrunching his eyes and nose in confusion. It means eating healthy food so you don't remain short forever, the clone snickered. Hey, why do you keep insulting me? Us? Naruto asked in annoyance. I'm just saying things as they are. Remember, whatever you ignore I don't, the clone said. Naruto grumbled but conceded in the end. Fine, if it will shut you up, we'll buy the stupid fruit and vegetables. Wow, you're not entirely unreasonable. This might not be so hard after all, the clone said. Naruto just flipped him off before yelling, how the hell do you know about proper nutrition anyway? Nutrition, the clone corrected without missing a beat. Remember all those classes in the academy you ignored? Naruto's look told him that no, he did not remember, so the clone just continued. Well, as I've said many times, whatever you ignore. I know, you don't. So? Naruto cut in. Well, one of the classes was on proper ninja nutrition. What kind of foods you should eat in order to compensate for the high amount of energy you spend while doing missions, the clone explained. So what, we had to stop eating ramen? Naruto asked, horror clearly etched on his face. Hell no. This was probably the first time Naruto saw the clone so unsettled. Ramen is really high on calories, even if the sodium might be too much. The clone saw Naruto's look and explained with a sigh, sodium basically means salt. I knew that, Naruto muttered looking away. The clone just rolled his eyes and continued with the explanation. The problem with ramen is it's high on calories but not other things that are important for our growth. Stuff like vitamins and fiber which are in abundance in fruit and vegetables. Naruto let out another sigh, before finally conceding, fine. The clone smiled which sent a chill down the original spine. Sometimes Naruto forgot that the clone represented all of his hatred and malicious thoughts. The clone hated Konoha and everyone in it. It was civil towards him because it was him. It didn't change the fact that Naruto felt really happy for its attention, even if to an outsider it would probably look pathetic. Pathetic at least was way better than alone in Naruto's book. Putting those thoughts aside, Naruto asked, so, what else do you want to talk about? There is so much. Where should I start? The clone threw his hands in the air, before standing up and heading for the living room. We better get comfortable, this will be a long conversation. Naruto followed him and both blondes settled on the couch. Okay, first, you may not have noticed, but I'm still here, the clone began. Of course I've noticed, I can see you. Naruto gave the clone a confused look. Normally when you create shadow clones, you split your own chakra and give your clone a certain amount. I was given half of your chakra, which is an incredibly large amount. We have the stupid fox to thank for that. The clone paused to see if Naruto was still with him. So you were made with the furball's chakra? Naruto asked, a bit confused. No, with ours. But we have incredibly large chakra reserves and I think it's because of the fox. Unfortunately, even I don't know the theory behind it, but I guess it's characteristic for Jinchuriki. 8. Explained the clone and Naruto palmed his face in realization. Jinchuriki. That's what the old man had called him. There's more, not only have you split our own chakra between the two of us, but you've also split Kyuubi's chakra as well. Meaning each of us has a piece of the fox in them. So that applies for every clone I make? Naruto asked. Yep, but that's not the only reason I'm still here. Now, tell me, how do we restore our chakra after we spend it? The clone asked. He could have outright explained it to Naruto since it was another lesson from the academy that was ignored. But he wanted the creator to think for a change. Who knows, it might actually become a habit. By resting? Naruto replied after a while. What else? Eating? He tried again? That's right, the clone said. You restore chakra with rest and nourishment. That doesn't apply to clones though, just being in the world drains from the chakra you've given us, so resting doesn't work for us. Which is strange, since I have a fully developed chakra system which is a complete copy of yours. It gets stranger though, because nourishment actually did restore some of the chakra that you've given me. So you eating last night helped you replenish chakra? Oh, that's why you ate this morning as well, to stay here longer. Naruto exclaimed. Yep. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's how the jutsu is supposed to work or if it has something to do with our furry friend. The clone rubbed his stomach. You did not read the entire description of the jutsu from the scroll, just how it's performed, and immediately started practicing. Should we steal it again? Or maybe ask the old man? Naruto suggested. Nah, it's probably guarded better now. And I don't trust the Hokage, said the clone. What? But he's the old man, he helped us with the apartment. He's been helping us all our life. Naruto said. You're making it sound like it's a big deal. He's just protecting his weapon, the clone said, and after seeing Naruto's shocked expression continued with an explanation. We're a Jinchuriki. A sacrifice made for the good of the village. You heard him last night, there are 8 others like us. Every big village has Jinchuriki because of the power of the beast sealed inside us. Because in case of wars, we get sent to the front lines. Another silence followed, and the clone could see Naruto was thinking hard over what was just said. But the clone was not satisfied. This is why I hate this village and everyone in it. They spout crap about the will of fire and how everyone should stick together and protect the dreams of the new generation. Yet they treat us like dirt, despite the sacrifice we've made. We were never even given a choice on the matter. Just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Naruto racked his brain for a response and quickly retorted, they just lost people to the fox. They're afraid. Oh? And I suppose taking it on a small child made them feel better, the clone responded. Naruto opened his mouth and closed it immediately. The clone took it as encouragement and tried pushing it even further. I'm telling you. Number 1 on the agenda should be burning this village to the ground, and laughing madly while doing it. The clone grinned and barely managed to dodge the fist that was launched at its face. He grabbed it and looked at his creator. Careful now. 1 hit and I'm gone. Naruto was really tempted to follow through. But that meant being alone again. So instead he settled for a threat. Don't even joke like that. It's not like killing everyone will change our past, he said with a serious frown on his face. It was a surprisingly mature thing to say, and the clone knew exactly why. After all, Naruto had thought about it in the past before locking those thoughts away. TCH, fine, the clone conceded. They're not worth the time anyway. He waved dismissively and looked out of the window. They both kept silent, each with their own thoughts, until the clone spoke again and stirred them back on track. Either way, we can experiment with the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu ourselves. It's not like you have a shortage of chakra. We can really test the limits. Besides, I don't think the Nidame, 9, even imagine something like clones having different personalities would be possible. Huh? The Nidame? Naruto asked, confused. He was the creator of the jutsu, it was written right above the name in the scroll. The clone shook his head in exasperation. Oh, I knew that. Naruto scratched the back of his head nervously. So what should we try first? First, the clone said, you're going to clean the apartment. What? It's filthy. We are not going to keep living like a bunch of pigs. The clone would not budge on this. Since when did you care? Naruto asked incredulously. The clone let out a sigh and looked his creator straight in the eye. Seems like you keep forgetting. Whatever you ignore, I notice. You ignore the state of your apartment, I'm going to point it out. I hate cleaning. It's so tedious, Naruto exclaimed. If only there was some jutsu you could use to make a copy of yourself. A copy that could do all the housework. Hey, even cook, like a maid. The clone supplied. Oh right, so I just make a clone? Naruto asked. Actually, let's start testing right away, the clone said thoughtfully. I want you to remember how the kids brought homemade lunches to the academy. What? How will that help? Naruto scrunched his eyes in confusion. Just close your eyes and do it, the clone said. With a sigh, Naruto did just that and kept silent. Now, the clone continued. Remember how they brought those lunches and how they were talking about them. How they would trade with each other, how they would talk about them and even complain about certain things. Naruto frowned after a moment, which nudged the clone to continue. Now remember how you felt. How nice it would have been if someone cooked for us. If someone cleaned after us and nagged us for being messy, scolded us for not doing our chores, but still took care of our home. Naruto's frown deepened. He remembered those feelings. He had felt them just last week. He'd been feeling them for the past 5 years since he started the academy. His hands twitched and he made the cross hand sign needed for the shadow clone technique. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a poof of smoke, another clone appeared in the room. Naruto and the red-eyed clone looked at the new arrival expectantly. He was a complete copy of Naruto, complete with the blue eyes. The silence was broken by the creator. "So, do you have the urge to clean and prepare food for us?" he asked. "Hell no," the new clone shouted, which made both Naruto and the red-eyed clone frown. However, before they could say anything, the new clone continued, "I'm not going to be your maid. Maids are supposed to be female." Naruto and the red-eyed clone exchanged a look, before the creator asked, "But you don't mind cleaning or cooking?" "Well," the new clone hesitated for a moment, "I mean, this place is pretty dirty. And you do need to eat properly. You're uncomfortable with being a male maid?" the red-eyed clone asked. The new clone hesitated again before nodding a bit shyly. "Well, it's a good thing we have the jutsu for that, don't we?" Naruto grinned. Realization hit the new clone before he made the ram sign. Oiroke no Jutsu, 10. Another poof of smoke surrounded the new clone before it dissipated to reveal a girl. She was as tall as Naruto and had the same eyes, whisker marks and golden blonde hair as him. However, it was much longer than his and tied into 2 high pigtails. If they were untied, it would probably flow below her waist. She had slender legs and arms and a lithe body with a flat, well-toned stomach. She was also completely naked. "Kya!" the girl shouted loudly and tried to cover her modesty. "What the hell?" Naruto and the red-eyed clone both grabbed their ears in pain. "Perverts!" the girl screamed again and crouched to the ground, trying to further cover herself. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" the red-eyed clone shouted in annoyance. The clone pointed at Naruto, created the technique. "There's nothing you have that we haven't seen." "Oh," the girl clone said before she stood up. "Oopsie." She rubbed the back of her head sheepishly and laughed nervously. The red-eyed clone sighed and muttered something about being surrounded by idiots. Naruto on the other hand just smiled and said, "It's okay, you kind of did the right thing. I mean, technically you're a girl now and that's the normal reaction." The girl clone giggled but frowned after she heard the red-eyed clone say, "Yeah, whatever. You should get to work." She suddenly took a step forward that brought her right in front of her red-eyed brother, narrowed her eyes dangerously while putting her hands on her hips, and looked downwards at him. The red-eyed clone suddenly felt like he hadn't said the right thing. An ancient fear that was basically incorporated in his genes, or his cloned genes if someone wanted to get technical about it, made him sit straight and stiffened his whole body. It was a fear known to all men, no matter their age or standing. It was the fear of pissing off the wrong representative of the female species. "What?" her voice had changed from bubbly and cheerful to ice-cold and merciless. "Did you say to me?" The red-eyed clone realized this was stupid. She was just a clone, coming from the same creator as him. She wasn't even a real she. She shouldn't be able to channel such powers through her voice. Yet no matter how much he repeated those thoughts in his head, he wisely decided to carefully choose his next words. Sorry for shouting at you like that," the red-eyed clone said in a rush. Naruto on the other hand couldn't help himself from snickering. Seeing the red-eyed jerk squirm like that was incredibly funny. Unfortunately, the noise brought the attention of his female clone to him. "And what," she snapped at the creator, "is so damn funny if I may ask?" she said with an edge to her voice that suggested it better not be her that was being the funny one. Naruto gulped nervously and stammered, nothing at all." She narrowed her eyes further, making both of them sweat and retreat even more into the couch before asking, "I suppose you're expecting me to cook, clean and be your maid now?" Naruto exchanged a look with the red-eyed clone. A silent war was waged between them, before the clone finally answered, "Well, that was why you were created and why you were given your personality." The girl clone seemed to consider this for a moment. She rolled the words in her mind as if she was testing them, putting them under scrutiny and trying to find if there was anything wrong with them. She realized that actually yes, she did want to take care of the creator. Being taken care of was one of his deepest childish desires that had existed since the moment he started living alone. Which made it one of her desires, and taking care of the apartment and him would be fulfilling that desire and by proxy her desire as well. The female clone could find nothing wrong with that logic and she agreed to her role and purpose. However, she did find plenty wrong with her current attire. "All right," she said, and a collective release of a held breath was heard coming from the two boys. However, she continued, and a collective intake of a sharp breath was heard coming from the two boys. "I need the proper clothes." "What?" the red-eyed clone managed out. "If I'm going to be your maid," she looked at the creator, "you will provide me with the right uniform." Naruto gulped and was about to answer, but the red-eyed clone was faster. "You're a clone. You'll disappear after you finish your job." The girl clone's head whipped in his direction and she bent her waist to close in on her prey. "So?" The red-eyed clone had suddenly discovered he could not back up any further into the couch no matter how much he tried. Luckily for him, Naruto saved his sorry behind just in the nick of time. "Maid uniform. Right." Naruto jumped from his seat, grabbed the red-eyed clone's wrist and pulled him away towards the door of the apartment. "We'll go and get you one right away. And it better have orange on it." They heard her shout before they shut the apartment door behind them. The two of them let out another breath they didn't know they were holding, before the red-eyed clone looked at the original. "What the fuck did you just create?" he asked. Naruto just gave him a defeated look, before he headed down the stairs. "Come on. The sooner we get the uniform, the better." His red-eyed copy just followed him. Naruto turned towards him and asked, "And what does fuck mean?" "I'll explain on the way," the clone replied. 30 minutes later, and a quick trip to a store known as Orange World saw the two back at their apartment and looking at a surprisingly cheerful female clone. She was twirling around and looking over herself in the mirror. She was wearing a typical maid uniform with one notable difference from the normal maid uniforms. Whatever wasn't black was orange, instead of white. It consisted of a black, frilly dress with a pair of black wristbands. It had a dark orange frilly skirt in addition under the dress and a dark orange frilly apron fastened into a giant orange ribbon at the back of her slim waist. The cap was also dark orange with a small black ribbon at the middle. She also wore a pair of orange stockings and the outfit was completed with a pair of black high-heeled open-tipped ninja sandals. She giggled and once again twirled in front of the mirror. Both boys had to admit she looked pretty good in it. One could never go wrong with orange. Thank the gods for Orange World. It was a small store that offered a wide variety of clothes, items and accessories that came in orange and its many variations. It was oriented to all people who had an appreciation for the color, so as expected it had a very niche and eccentric clientele. The outfit had put a small dent into Naruto's finances, but for some reason he felt happy when he saw his female clone so full of joy. It was probably because the outfit could be considered a gift and he rarely got those. So by proxy, his clones rarely got those as well. Again, it was probably pathetic, getting all happy about a gift he technically made to himself. And again, he did not care. "So," Naruto said, catching the attention of both his clones, "what should I call you guys? I mean, I know you're both clones, but you have your own personalities and it'd be weird to say, 'Hey you,' or something." The two clones looked at their creator with surprise. He did have a point, even if they were all the same being, they were different aspects. Having names would be easier for communication. But it had a much deeper meaning than that. Having names would give them an identity. They would become someone in each other's life. And the fact that the creator acknowledged them like that made them incredibly happy. Or slightly less homicidal in the red-eyed clone's case. The female clone scrunched her face in her thinking pose, looking much like Naruto when he had the same pose. After a bit of thinking she finally said, "I think I'd like the name Naruko." "Naruko?" Naruto said, surprised. "What? Something wrong with it?" She challenged him, even though she felt a bit of anxiety. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to have a name that resembled the creator's so much. Maybe she had offended him. "No," Naruto said quickly, "I like it, it sounds pretty cute," he grinned. "It suits you." The newly named Naruko couldn't help her blush, before she tugged one of her pigtails in embarrassment. "And what about you?" Naruto asked the red-eyed clone as both he and Naruko turned to him. The clone kept silent for a moment longer before he stood up. He moved towards Naruto and offered him his hand while looking him straight in the eyes. Yami, 11. Naruto looked at him for a long period of time. He could do a lot of things. Tell him to pick another name. Dispel him and lock him away deep into his soul like before. He would lie if he said he liked the red-eyed clone. It worried him, but at the same time, he would be doing the same thing the villagers had done to him in the past. Worse yet, he would be doing it to a side of himself that yearned his acceptance as much as he yearned for acceptance in general. Acceptance he felt he had finally achieved from his clones, as pathetic as it sounded. Still, pathetic was better than lonely. It was a tense moment, a moment where the universe held its breath in expectation to see what would happen. Slowly, Naruto lifted his hand and grasped Yami's. In the end, he was a part of him. If he wanted to move on in life, he had to be able to accept himself. Nice to meet you, Yami, Naruto smiled at him. For years to come, Yami would deny it, no matter how adamant Naruto and Naruto were about it. Yet the edges of his lips twitched slightly upwards from the thin line that he usually wore on his face. A loud squeal was heard and both boys found themselves gripped in a tight hug by Naruto, who could not contain her happiness as she jumped around. What the? Unhand me, you airheaded bimbo! Yami screamed with a voice filled with annoyance. Naruto ignored him, and Naruto couldn't hold his laughter anymore. It took some time for Naruto to calm down and release them. But in the end, she did, and immediately went around the apartment to check what kind of supplies they actually had and what they would need to buy for the future cleaning and food preparation. The task didn't take particularly long, and that was why she was currently sitting on a chair in front of the couch, where Naruto and Yami had been patiently waiting for her. We've got nothing, Naruto said. I found one bottle of bathroom cleaner from a brand that stopped existing a little after we moved in. Huh? Was the only response that came from Naruto, while Yami decided it would be safer if he kept quiet for now. What do you mean, huh? Naruto raised her voice slightly. When was the last time we even cleaned this place? All three of them went down memory lane until they reached a particular day almost a year and a half ago. During those times, Naruto had found it annoying to take out the trash every week and instead had opted for doing it once a month. Which, in Naruto terms, actually meant once every 3 or so months. The day they were thinking about was special because the trash hadn't been taken care of for the record time of 4 months and 24 days. Which resulted in it somehow developing sentience and attacking Naruto once he got back home from the academy. Needless to say, the trash had been taken care of every week from then on, like clockwork. The shock, and the ensuing battle, had been so great that Naruto had even spent the whole of 2 days completely cleaning the entire apartment, which in Naruto terms meant throwing out all empty or used ramen cups coupled with a touch of light dusting of all the visible areas. After the memory had been relived, 3 worried glances were sent towards the trash can. It was observed for an entire minute, just in case it was also reliving the same memory, and decided there should be some sort of reenactment for good old time's sake. We'll need to buy a lot of things, Naruto said after they were certain there was no silly garbage sneaking on them or something. We also need to get groceries. The only thing we have left is half a loaf of bread, a carton of expired milk, and about 20 instant ramen cups. There was a groan heard from Naruto. This will put a serious dent on our savings. From the moment he had joined the academy and had started living in his own apartment, Naruto had been receiving an orphan stipend. He had learned from a very young age how to manage his money, and he wasn't actually a person who indulged too much. He avoided buying anything more than the essentials with the exception of a couple of purchases from Orange World. The cold treatment he had usually received from stores had nothing to do with it. He was just a very smart spender. Yep. Still, buying enough cleaning supplies and garbage bags for a complete spring cleaning would probably be expensive. Not to mention cleaning supplies would now be a constant expense as well, since Naruto would probably do her best to keep the place tidy. Another thought came to mind and Naruto immediately voiced it. If we're going to eat better, we'll have to spend more money on food. And we'll have to buy for 3 people now too. He hid his face in his hands at the image of a large chunk of bills suddenly growing wings and flying away to money heaven. Not exactly, Yami finally spoke. What do you mean? Naruto looked up from his hands. First, we have this, Yami said and produced a small green toad purse from his pocket. It was well rounded from the amount of bills inside it, and it also had 4 small legs coming from the sides. If it were to be opened, it would look like the toad was actually opening its mouth. There was also a white stripe on its belly where the words, Naruto's wallet, could be read. Naruto gasped, Gamma, 1, Chan, 2. He frantically reached for his own pocket. When the hell did you? He trailed off when he took his own purse out. Both his and Naruto's eyes widened when they looked between the two wallets in realization. That's right, Yami said. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu not only makes copies of the person, but also of their entire equipment. Meaning clothes, weapons and money, he explained and opened his Gamma-chan to show them its contents. And true to his word, it was filled with bills. So wait, they're also an exact replica? Even the amount? Naruto asked. That's right. Which means we could use this. Yami grinned one of his plotting grins. Naruto on the other hand was frowning. What happens when the clone disappears? Yami hesitated only for a moment before answering. Well, naturally all of the equipment disappears as well. We're not using this then, Naruto said and crossed his arms. Naruto was looking between the two of them in confusion with slightly furrowed brows. After a moment she realized what they were talking about, but instead of saying anything she just grabbed one of her pigtails and started playing with it nervously between her fingers. Naruto, Yami began, we won't last long with our savings. We need to use this to our advantage. It'd be the same as stealing. Or paying with fake money. Naruto protested. We're ninja now. If you haven't forgotten, lying, cheating and stealing is part of the job description, Yami said calmly. A flash in Naruto's eyes suggested that he may have forgotten that part, however his features immediately turned back into a frown. It's not right, right? Yami raised his voice in barely contained anger. What part of our life can ever be considered as remotely right? He asked through clenched teeth. No response came from Naruto or Naruto for that matter. It was a rhetorical question. That question that already had an answer. The fact Naruto was sitting in his apartment right now and talking to two clones was the answer. Yami looked at their expressions and his face relaxed a bit. He shifted his gaze at the far wall and ran a hand through his hair. It was painful to bring up how pathetic their life actually was, but Naruto needed a wake-up call. Yami couldn't blame him really. Naruto had been ignoring everything that had been bothering him for far too long. Yami had to be begrudgingly thankful since that was the reason he even existed. And he was here, at this moment, because he had to make sure Naruto couldn't ignore anymore. Still, the village hadn't been built in a day. Or whatever. Yami wasn't sure if that was the right expression. The point was he should be taking little steps. Look, he said after letting out a long drawn-out sigh, we won't be doing it all the time. It would be too suspicious and would draw attention. And we should only do it to stores that treated us particularly nasty. It would just be righteous karma. He didn't get a response, so he continued, besides, technically it's not paying with fake money. These are actually real money, or rather perfect copies of real money. No matter how much they're inspected, there is nothing wrong with them and for the duration of their existence they can be used without any problems. And when they do disappear, they will leave no trace or evidence leading back to us. People will just think they lost them or something. You're just saying things to make us feel better about the whole thing, Naruto finally responded. Rationalization, Yami said without thinking, getting two pairs of confused looks. That's what you call lies we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better, he explained. How do you even know these things? Naruto yelled in annoyance. Yami smirked. Remember how I told you I represent everything that you ignore? Well, that included your intelligence. A light giggle could be heard from Naruto while Naruto just glared at his red-eyed clone. Then his face lit up as if he had thought of some particularly snarky remark, which he immediately fired, ha. You think you're so clever? Well, you're not. You're my copy, which means you have my intelligence and I have no intelligence. Silence engulfed the apartment. If you were a being of sufficient enough intellect and comprehension of cosmic dynamics, you would be able to hear even the universe palming her face at this exact moment. Naruto. The only present female was the first to speak. That was really lame. Naruto on the other hand was looking away, his cheeks practically emanating crimson light from the blush he had on. He should really spend at least 5 seconds thinking before saying the first thing that came to his mind. It shouldn't be that hard, right? Yami was shaking his head and rubbing the sides. He was doing his best to squash the urge to go on a particularly long and no doubt satisfying murder spree. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Why? Why him? He was just a dark, repressed bundle of malicious emotions. He didn't deserve this. All right, maybe he deserved it a little for all those fantasies of Konoha burning in him, dancing around and cackling from the bottom of his heart. But he was trying his best. Worse yet, from the moment she had been created, Yami knew Naruto wouldn't be any help. He could definitely see her being basically the female version of the creator, even if she did possess those weird powers with her voice. Which meant his work had doubled, since now he had to explain things to one more person. He let out another sigh. Bah, whatever, he thought. Letting go of his frustration, at least for the moment, Yami would look for small defenseless critters to vent his frustrations on properly later in the day. It was just one more person, how bad could it be? It's not like the world would end or something. Somewhere, in a distant, alternate universe. I told you not to use that jutsu. Alternate Yami yelled, while he was running away from the huge cracks that were forming in the ground and were currently chasing them. Those were my exact words. Naruto, do not use that jutsu. I'm sorry. Alternate Naruto shouted, running right behind him. I got distracted for a bit while you were talking. A bit? You weren't listening at all, were you, you pea-brained imbecile? Alternate Yami yelled again. Alternate Naruto decided to add his input on the matter. Back in our proper and undamaged, yet, universe. An ominous feeling suddenly swept over Yami. He wondered what it could be for a moment. Nothing important probably, just these two idiots influencing my intelligence, he thought. There were more important things at hand, he didn't have time to waste on some silly feelings. Anyway, Yami said, bringing everyone's attention back on track. I've made my point. In more than one way too. Naruto ran a hand through his hair, much like how Yami had earlier, and looked at Naruto. What about you? What do you think? He asked her. Me? Naruto stopped fiddling with her hair and looked surprised at her creator. Yeah, we're all in this together. I want to know your opinion too, said Naruto. Naruto looked at the ground and smiled. She brought her right hand to her face to hide it and nervously traced one of her whisker marks with her thumb. She wasn't used to someone asking for her opinion, which was understandable since Naruto had rarely been asked for his. And in some twisted, bizarre way she was him, but different because. She stopped her trail of thought before it became too confusing. She moved her hand down, grabbing the end of her right pigtail again, and looked over to Yami. Her gaze shifted to Naruto and met his eyes for a brief moment before she quickly looked away. She bit her lip and rested her palms on her skirt. It was just such a shame that the first time she had been genuinely asked for her opinion, she would probably disappoint the creator. However, she had to say it. Letting out a small huff and gathering her courage, she looked at Naruto straight in the eyes. I think we should use this, she said. Her response came in the form of a very angry scowl. You too? Naruto shouted as he stood up from his place. We swore to never do that, no matter how bad it got. She winced at his shout but stood up as well and met his glare head-on. Uzumaki Naruto never backed away from a challenge. No, you were the one who swore that. And that was when you were younger. We're not the same as you, we're different parts of you. Things are different now too. She waved her slender arm at Yami, is right. We should use every advantage we have, because we don't have much going for us at the moment. We graduated from the academy, which means no more orphan stipend. And until we start doing missions, we're living off of whatever savings we have. Naruto took a breath which calmed her slightly, before she spoke in a quieter voice. As weird as it sounds, we're like a family now. She tore her gaze from Naruto's shocked expression and continued. You two are the only thing I have in the world. If doing something like spending fake money means I can keep being with you like this, I'll do it as many times as I have to. She kept silent for a bit but no one took the pause to say anything. She looked up slightly to see Naruto's still shocked expression hadn't changed and played with the hem of her apron nervously. Look, she began again, it doesn't mean we have to like it. Maybe we won't even need to do it for long, since the income from missions might be enough. But I think we should do it at least for the time being. Naruto bit her lip and looked out the window, trying to hide the tears that had pooled in her eyes from the earlier admission. She hated showing her tears to anyone, even herself. Especially herself. Either way, she continued, you are our creator. I trust you and I'll follow whatever you decide. Yami was looking at the two with a surprised expression. It wasn't because Naruto had said he was right. That was natural, of course he was right. It wasn't because of her claim of their status as a family either. He didn't really concern himself with things like, he was way too practical. That's why there were no confusing feelings in his chest at the moment. Nope, nothing of the sorts. He was actually surprised because of a certain realization. This is probably what it felt like to have a moral dilemma. There were back and forth arguments and good and bad points for both sides of the fence. The only difference was that normal people led those debates inside their heads. Their argument was led between them, with each member of the newly dubbed Uzumaki household bringing a different side of Naruto. Naruto was the naive, moral and stupid one. Yami was the cynical realist who saw the world as it was and was always right and extremely handsome. Naruto's ability to delude himself existed in all aspects of his personality. Naruto. She was the compromise. He had to give it to her, for an airheaded bimbo she knew how to drive her point home. And her performance was excellent too. He was sure if not the argument, her tears would definitely convince Naruto. There was no way those were real, he refused to believe it. Or that they would have any effect on him as well. Yami had learnt the concept of rationalization basically because that was the reason for his existence. However, it didn't mean it made him immune from doing it to himself. It definitely had an effect on Naruto, however. It was one word that actually did it for him: family. It was a well-known fact that Naruto's dream was to one day become Hokage and even surpass all the previous Hokage. He shouted it at everyone that gave him even a second of their attention. He never shouted his other dream. Until recently, he never even openly admitted it to himself, because he would also be admitting how lonely he actually felt. What he wanted more than the title and the acknowledgement that came with it was a family. Someone to tell him, "Welcome home," when he got back home. Someone to fill the void and silence in his apartment. Someone to cure him from his loneliness. Now, he actually had someone like that, not one but two someones. They may be clones or pieces of his personality or whatever. But they were the closest thing to a family he would ever get. And at the first problem he was hesitating. Was his resolve this weak? Naruto's wasn't. Hell, her resolve was incredible. Yami's as well, although Naruto doubted the red-eyed jerk had the same sentiments on his mind, not openly at least. The real question wasn't whether it was right or wrong to do it. It was how far he was willing to go. He reached with his hand and grabbed one of Naruto's, catching her attention. "You're right," he said. He looked at Yami briefly and then back at Naruto. "You're both right." And without another word he stepped closer and enveloped her into a hug. One Naruto immediately returned with a wide smile. Yami looked at them impassively, before turning towards the window with a small snort. They still had a lot of things to discuss and do today, but he would let them have that moment. It's not like 5 or 10 minutes were going to make a difference. Naruto was the first to speak after they had broken the embrace and were back in their seats. "So I guess we should make a list and start buying stuff. If the two of you are going to be staying here, you'll need food to regenerate chakra." "Ah, and that brings me to my second point," Yami said. "Naruto, you must not keep a clone active for longer than a day." That brought him two surprised and at the same time fearful expressions. "What? Why?" Naruto shouted. "Doesn't that mean you guys would disappear?" "I can explain, but I think showing you would be faster," Yami said. He stood up and walked up to Naruto and whispered something in her ear. Her eyes widened, but before she could say anything, Yami hit her in the stomach, which made her disappear in a poof of smoke. Naruto was so shocked he could not do anything but gape at what had happened. "What did I tell her before she dispelled?" he vaguely heard Yami ask, but still could not recover from his surprise. "Hey, Naruto." Yami raised his voice, finally snapping him from his stupor. "What did I whisper to her?" What did you do?" Naruto uttered. "Did you? Is she gone?" Yami rolled his eyes. "Relax, you dimwit. She's perfectly fine and back inside." He tapped his head. "We'll summon her back in a bit." "Her clothes are gone," Naruto said dumbly. "What?" Yami raised a brow at him. "Her clothes. The ones we bought. Are they supposed to disappear as well?" Naruto asked, uneasiness dripping from his voice. Yami's eyes widened and he looked back at the spot that had been occupied by Naruto just a minute ago. It was true, there was absolutely no trace of her left. Was that supposed to happen? Damn it, he wished Naruto had read the Forbidden Scroll properly, so many questions would have been answered by that. He looked back at Naruto and swore. His creator still had the same wide-eyed expression directed at where Naruto had just been sitting. Except there was also a steady stream of tears flowing down his cheeks. Maybe he should have explained things properly first after all. Naruto. He closed the distance to him quickly and grabbed him by his shoulders. Look at me. When he got no response, he shook him and repeated, look at me. This time he gained his attention. Do you trust me? Yami asked him. What? Naruto asked with a voice that betrayed his complete loss. Do you trust me? Yami repeated. Look, I may be a jerk and a real asshole, but I would never do anything to hurt you. I'm you after all, I have our best interests in mind. He didn't get a response or even a reaction, which made him panic a bit. I'm sorry about that, I should have explained things properly. Naruto is all right, I promise, and we'll see her again in a bit. But I need you to focus and I need you to trust me, okay? A long moment passed before Naruto finally gave him a nod. Yami relaxed slightly at that, but still remained worried. He was supposed to be the smart one, he angrily berated himself. That definitely fell in the category of things Naruto would do. Okay, Yami said and sat down on the couch. What did I say to Naruto before she dispelled? Naruto was silent for a moment before a memory crossed his mind. I'm going to hit you. You told her you were going to hit her, Naruto said and narrowed his eyes slightly. Right, but did you hear me say it? I whispered it in her ear. There's no way you could have known, right? So how do you know? Yami asked. This confused Naruto once again. Yami was right, he hadn't heard him when he whispered it to Naruto. So how did he know? The only people that could know are Yami and Naruto. But Naruto was gone, back in his head according to Yami. Could that mean? That's right, Yami confirmed after he saw realization creeping into Naruto's eyes. When a clone gets dispelled, we receive all of its memories. There are some problems with that, one of which you are going to experience immediately. Huh? Naruto was once again confused. I need to dispel as well, I've been existing in the world for too long. You'll be hit with more than 12 hours worth of memories and dreams all at once. For the next bit, we'll meet in your mind. Yami explained. What? My mind? How are we going to meet there? Naruto asked, still confused. Cause you're about to pass out, Yami smirked and dispelled. Naruto didn't have time to even prepare, because he felt like his head was hit with a sledgehammer before darkness engulfed him. Drip. The sound of that single drop hitting the surface of water echoed in his mind and intensified the pain he felt in his brain. Naruto scrunched his eyes and let out a loud groan before he grabbed the sides of his head. He started counting until the dull throbbing he felt finally started disappearing. He opened his eyes to see a dark ceiling. That was not the ceiling of his apartment. Huh, what? He muttered and tried rising up. He somehow managed it and then stood up completely. Which, he realized a second too late, was too ambitious of an undertaking for him. He felt the world spin and was about to fall face first into the water when someone grabbed him. Ah, you've finally woken up, Naruto heard the familiar voice of Yami. Where are we? The original blonde asked when the world stopped spinning. In your mind, or I guess, our mind, Yami said. Naruto took the time to look around. Yellowing gray walls and ceiling, rusty and mossy pipes of various sizes all around them, and they were standing in water. A sewer? He scrunched his face. Yep, Yami answered a bit too cheerfully for his taste. Kind of brings a new dimension to the phrase, mind in the gutter, doesn't it? Yami laughed. Naruto didn't share his amusement and with good reason. My head is killing me, he said. Well, what did you expect? You just got hit with more than 12 hours of mine and Naruto's collective memories and experiences. Well, it was about an hour from Naruto's side, but still, Yami said. So, I get the memories of the clones when they disappear, Naruto said. Yep, and their fatigue, Yami nodded. How did you know that? It wasn't written in the scroll, Naruto looked at him. Actually, it may have been. I told you, you did not read it properly, said Yami. Then, how? Remember last night, when you beat Mizuki? You summoned like 100, maybe even more clones, Yami started explaining. But, I didn't get their memories. Or a giant headache, Naruto interrupted him. Nope, you did. However, you ignored them because of the adrenaline and the whole revelation. But as I've said many times, if you ignore something. Yami trailed off looking at him expectantly. You don't, Naruto finished with realization. But wait, why didn't I still feel tired? Well, ignoring your memories like that actually reduced the fatigue. The clones existed for less than a minute as well. And finally, you have me. Yami continued his explanation. Naruto scrunched his face in confusion again, before saying, "You mean you?" "That's right," Yami interrupted him. "I minimized the backlash because I took it all. I then took proper time to sort through all the memories and dismiss them. So, you didn't suffer any negative effects." "You're welcome by the way," Yami finished smugly. "Huh," was Naruto's only response, and he looked around once again. Yami shook his head. "That's all I get?" "No, thank you, oh great Yami, for saving me from the headache and sorting through those useless memories. I really appreciate it," or anything of the sorts. Tisk tisk, Yami shook his head with amusement. Yeah, thanks." Naruto rolled his eyes before a very important thought came to mind. "Wait, where's Naruko? If we're in our mind, she should be here as well, right?" "Relax, let's take a walk, and I'll explain things," Yami said and started leading him through the corridors. "So, is it going to hurt like that every time I summon and dispel you and Naruko?" Naruto asked. "It would usually hurt like that if we stayed out for a long period of time. Like from morning to evening for example, which is something I'm guessing we both want." Yami looked at him. Naruto simply nodded and laughed nervously. "If that's the cost for having you two, it's nothing." "Oh?" Yami said with amusement, "and what happens if we add more aspects of your personality? And what you got a taste of was just the backlash from me." True, Naruko was dispelled as well, but she didn't have as big of an impact because she was only out for like an hour and a half. So even with just me and her out, your pain will double. "It's nothing, I can take it," Naruto said with determination dripping from his voice. "Well, I'm glad you have a masochistic stake in you," Yami chuckled darkly before he caught Naruto's expression. "That means taking pleasure from being hurt. Anyway, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we'll have to find other ways to hurt you." "Huh?" Naruto scrunched his eyes and tilted his head to the side in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Well, I've prepared a solution for your predicament," Yami smirked. "No need to look amazed, such things are expected from the better half." "Hey." Naruto was about to protest further, but they rounded a corner and entered a much wider corridor. That wasn't its only feature though. It had a door on each side and there was a large barred gate at the end. "Doors?" Naruto asked. "Yep," Yami said excitedly and began his explanation. "It's pretty simple actually. That," he pointed to the door on the left, "is my door." The door itself was colored in black. It had a huge sign at the top, saying, "Yami's room," and multiple stop signs and stickers pinned on it. It even had barbed wire around the frame and a military police tape in a cross shape over it. The tape read, "Restricted, enter at own risk. All of my memories will automatically go in here after I get dispelled and then we can go through them at our own pace." Same thing goes for Naruko, Yami pointed at the other door. It was pink in color and had two large flower stickers at the upper right and lower left portion of the door. On top of it a sign read, "Naruko's World." "This also gives us a semblance of privacy," Yami said. "Huh? What do you mean?" Naruto asked confused. "The way the jutsu works is that you get all of your clones' memories. But from last night we know that you can ignore them or at least ignore portions of them. So here is how it's going to work. You will summon us in the morning, and we would be going about our day like normal. In the evening when you go to bed, you will dispel me first." "Why you first?" Naruto asked. "Because I created this system and I will keep the mental exhaustion to a minimum. Then Naruko and any other personality clones will disperse, and we will all meet here. We will then go through the memories together and when we're done, everyone goes to their room and we all go to sleep. And if there are any particular memories we don't want you to see, well, we would talk about it then." "What about regular clones? And what if one of you gets dispelled by accident?" Naruto asked. "If that happens, the moment the memories hit us, I will dispel as well immediately and minimize the backlash. Then I'll sort through the memories quickly to find out the reason behind it. As for regular clones, they shouldn't be of consequence, as long as you don't keep them for too long or have them do something that would be mentally strenuous. Normally, backlash from them wouldn't have been so bad, but me and Naruko changed that. Not to mention any additional personality clones we add." "What would happen then?" Naruto asked. "Well, we'd just add another door. It's still a work in progress really, even I haven't gotten over all of the kinks. It's not like it's ever been done before and our situation is pretty unique. Which means we'll have to deal with any problems that come up along the way, Yami explained. Wait, what do you mean unique? Naruto tilted his head to the side. Yami pointed at the end of the corridor, where the barred gate was. See that gate over there? After he got a nod, he continued, do not go there or open it. Not yet at least. That gate leads to the room where Kyuubi's consciousness resides. I doubt you want to meet the fuzzball at the moment. Yami trailed off and received a vigorous shaking of the head. So how come I don't get a door? Naruto asked. Yami looked at him funnily, before answering, because this whole place, he motioned with his arms, belongs to you. You don't need a door to your own mind. We on the other hand are parts of you, so it makes it easier. But what if I wanted to have some private thoughts of my own as well? Besides, it'd be cool to have my own door. It'd be like we were living in a house and everyone had their own room which we could decorate whatever way we wanted. I've always wanted something like that, Naruto said, his voice growing quite at the end. But Yami looked at him in exasperation and let out a sigh. Fine, I'll see what I can do. I'm not making promises though. He should have seen this coming really. He had designed the system like this because it had been one of Naruto's oldest desires after all. Naruto gave him a happy grin before asking, so where's Naruko? Shouldn't she be here as well? Oh yeah, she should be in her room, Yami said, and the two went over to the pink door. Hey Naruko. Yami yelled and opened the door. You should come. Whatever he was about to say was rudely interrupted by a fist to the jaw that sent him flying to the floor. Yami let out a groan and tried getting up, but instead got a kick for his troubles, courtesy of one very angry Naruko. Don't you ever do that again, asshole. Each word was punctuated with a particularly vicious kick. Naruko. The irate female felt a pair of arms grab her from behind. For a moment she thought Naruto was trying to stop her or something suicidal like that. But then she realized he was just giving her a tight embrace. I was so worried. I thought you were gone forever, Naruto muttered. She couldn't help it. She turned around and immediately locked her slender arms around him. To hear someone was worried for her with such intensity, that her presence mattered so much to anyone, was a wish come true. It was a wish all of them shared, even the red-eyed jerk that was groaning on the floor. And a wish all of them had fulfilled. I know, she replied, moving her fingers through Naruto's messy locks. When I dispersed, everything was dark. I thought I stopped existing. But then I found myself in that room and I could hear both your voices. So, I did the sensible thing and plotted payback, she said with a scary grin on her face. Naruto laughed and saw Yami had finally managed to stand up. Serves you right, jerk, he stuck out his tongue at his red-eyed counterpart, who was rubbing his bruised jaw. Of course you realize, he paused to let out a groan, this means war, right? Naruko released her creator and turned around towards Yami. She took a step forward, which in turn took every fiber of Yami's will not to respond with a step backwards. Her grin only grew even scarier as she put her hands on the sides of her thin waist and replied. Oh, bring it. Naruto felt he should probably intervene. He had nothing against a good old-fashioned prank war, but they still had stuff to do in the real world. Besides, he didn't have popcorn. Guys. He moved between them, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. Luckily for him, they were too busy engaging in a staring war. We've got things to do, remember? You can settle this later. A tense moment passed before Naruko's grin completely lost its maliciousness and she directed a cheerful smile at Naruto. Okay. The cheerfulness was evident in her voice as well. Yami just let out a snort and looked away. Fine, you should wake up and summon us in the real world. Naruto hesitated. How do I do that? What? Waking up or summoning us? Yami asked. Hee. Both actually, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Oh, Yami moved to him and put a hand over his shoulder as he started walking. It gave Naruto an uneasy feeling, but he let himself be led away anyway. I'll show you the exit. As for your second question, just think of us when you use the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. That's it? Naruto asked disbelievingly. Yep, I think it should be that easy now that we have names, identities and practically our own rooms in your mind. Naruko might be a bit different. Frankly, I have no idea what will happen, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Yami admitted. Summon me first. Frankly? Naruto asked. And what the hell was this talk about crossing bridges? Wasn't he supposed to be summoning them? It means honestly, Yami said and stopped in front of a big metal door. Naruto looked at it and realized he hadn't noticed it before. It was on the wall where the gate to Kyuubi's room was located. It was gray in color and it looked pretty sturdy. He noticed above it there was a green sign that read, "Exit," with a drawing of a stick figure following an arrow that went through an open door. "Just step through here," Yami told him and released his shoulder before taking a step back. Naruto shrugged and went up to the door before he opened it. There was nothing there. Literally, it was just darkness and he could see from the light coming from the corridor the door led to an abyss. What the? He never got a chance to finish since Yami kicked his butt, sending him flying through with a loud scream. Yami chuckled darkly, openly showing his amusement before closing the door. "Ground rules," he said as his features went back to his usual passive frown. "Number 1 and most importantly, whatever we do to each other must never trouble our beloved knucklehead in any way." He turned around to meet Naruto's serious look. The earlier cheerfulness had disappeared from her face and her lips were pressed together. Her hands were locked at her chest and she gave no response to what Yami had said. So he continued, "Number 2, we can't do anything in the real world that would cause one of us to dispel. Naruto would have to reform us again and that'd be a waste of chakra and time, which goes back to the first rule." He didn't even bother to wait for a response and moved on. "And number 3, this place is fair game. Everything goes here as long as it doesn't break rule number 1. After the first rule had been set, Naruto had brought a hand to one of her pigtails while the other had gone to the side of her waist. She had a thoughtful look on her face while she looked at her fingers playing with her hair, as if contemplating something important. Finally, she brought her hand to her face and brushed her golden locks under her nose. They weren't as soft as she expected. Or wanted for that matter. Maybe she should get that conditioner thingy Naruto had heard the girls in the academy talk about. Apparently, it made the hair really soft and pleasant to the touch or something. "I agree," she said absent-mindedly, after the red-eyed jerkface had finished, not really paying attention to him anymore. Oh, maybe she could find an orange-scented shampoo too. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he jumped off the coach with a yell. He looked around, startled from the experience of falling into nothingness and noted with a relief that he was back in his apartment. That Yami jerk. He played him good, which was annoying since Naruto was supposed to be the master prankster around here. Even more annoying was the fact it had probably looked really funny too and Naruto knew if the roles were reversed, he'd have done the same thing. The worst part however was he couldn't get payback, since Yami would simply dispel. He would have to think about something later. For now he put his fingers in the familiar cross sign and concentrated, having a clear image of Yami in his mind. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A puff of smoke later and his darker side was standing in front of him. "That was easy," Naruto said. "Indeed," Yami said while looking himself over. Everything seemed to be in order so he looked back at Naruto. "Now try the same with Naruko. Although I'm not sure it'll be this easy with her." Naruto nodded seriously and repeated the hand sign. He concentrated again and the image of Naruko appeared in his mind, along with the feelings he had the first time he summoned her. Or him technically. He guessed something similar would happen now. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he said again and another puff of smoke appeared in the room. However, neither him nor Yami were prepared for what they saw after it cleared. It was Naruko. As an already female and fully clothed in her maid dress Naruko. She looked herself over, checking every part of her attire and body, before she nodded seemingly satisfied with the results. Naruto however was extremely confused. "I did not expect this," he said. "What?" Naruto asked, now sharing his confusion, albeit for a different reason. "Well, you, like this." Naruto waved his hand at her. "What's wrong with me?" Naruko asked with a hint of worry now creeping in her voice. She brushed her bangs quickly and ran a thumb over one of her whisker marks, before running to the mirror to have a better look. Maybe she couldn't see what was wrong with her. She bit her lip as she inspected her face and then turned around and twisted her neck in an effort to see her backside. "That's the thing, you look exactly as you should," Naruto said. "The first time I summoned you, you had to use the transformation technique and you had no clothes. But now you look exactly the same as before you were dispelled." Naruko's eyes widened in realization before she looked at her hands. They quickly shot to her chest and gave a light squeeze. Then she quickly moved her right hand between her legs and looked up at Naruto. "Well, I'm definitely a girl." And wait, you bought these clothes for me. How come they dispelled with me? And how come I'm wearing them now? They exchanged a confused look before turning to Yami for answers. He usually had them. Their hopes were crushed, however, when they saw he was sporting an equally confused and wide-eyed expression. His eyes were staring at Naruto and constantly darting over her body and attire from head to toe. Yami? Naruto's uneasy voice was heard. Yami answered, not moving his gaze away from Naruto's form, who had worriedly started playing with her left pigtail. Any ideas? Naruto asked. There was a pause, before Yami answered quietly, no. But you always have an idea, Naruto muttered. Well, I don't this time. Yami snapped at him suddenly, giving him his full attention. What do you expect from me? To know everything? I'm still a copy of you, somewhat at least. I'm not a genius, cause God knows you aren't. Naruto flinched and looked down, which made Yami inwardly curse. He had to keep better control over his emotions. Truth or not, making Naruto feel any more miserable about himself was the complete opposite of what he wanted. He could practically sense Naruto giving him a look at the moment. The special one females reserved for when guys did something particularly stupid when they should have known better. In his defense, he was Naruto's pent-up and hidden negative emotions. It was already hard enough keeping from going outside and layering Konoha with explosive tags. It was practically a miracle, all because he kept a lid on himself. Even though he really wanted to, it would be wrong to release his anger like that. The right thing was to keep it contained, until he identified a proper target and then unleash it like a pack of starving raccoons that have spotted a particularly plump garbage bag. Like the one that had attacked them a year and a half ago. But the proper target definitely wasn't Naruto. What was he to do now? Apologies weren't really his thing, the earlier one for the incident known as the Dispelling Naruto fiasco, being an obvious exception to the rule. He chanced a glance at said blonde airhead and almost immediately turned his eyes away. If her look got any more pointed, it would start poking holes through him and even the wall behind him. How was she even able to do that? Was it some sort of a woman's special ability? Did she gain those powers the moment she, turned into a she? Oh gods, now her hands were locked at her chest and she was tapping her right foot. He felt the look starting to dangerously prick at his forehead, and for a fraction of a second Yami considered using the Oiroke no Jutsu to gain those powers as well, hoping he would gain immunity to them too. But it was only a fraction of a moment of weakness. He had his male pride after all. Male pride that was going to dip a bit from what he was about to do. Damn it, Naruto, he let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his head. Oh great, now he was doing this too. I'm sorry for what I said. I shouldn't have snapped at you like that. I'm just frustrated cause I don't know why this happened, and it's another thing we'll have to figure out because we haven't read the Forbidden Scroll properly. That came out wrong. Well, it was technically the creator's fault for that, but Yami had not intended to point it out. Naruto's shoulders slumped even more and Yami practically sensed Naruto narrowing her eyes further and taking a step towards him. Before he had the chance to flee the scene of his imminent homicide, his creator spoke, "It's all right, Yami. I know I'm not pretty smart." Naruto gave a lopsided smile. "I guess we'll just have to figure something out. Or I guess wait for you to figure something out." Yami took a deep breath, filling his lungs with as much air as he could and released it. He felt the tension in him relaxing slightly, although it wasn't much of an improvement. This wasn't about him, however. He didn't want his creator to say things like that. Or rather, he didn't want him to sound so resigned when he did. He took a few steps forward until he stood up in front of Naruto and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Naruto, you're not an idiot. You may have a short attention span, or not know many words, or hell even important concepts like common sense. But we both know it's more because of your choice, rather than you being stupid." At his words Naruto turned his head away and tried looking everywhere, but at Yami, who continued, "You may not want to admit it to yourself, but you can't hide it from me. When you joined the academy, you wanted to learn new things. But then when you answered a question wrong, a lot of your classmates laughed. Gave you attention. So learning suddenly fell on your list of priorities in favor of being the class clown and making trouble to gain even more attention." Naruto swallowed heavily at the memory and muttered, "You probably think I'm stupid for doing that." Yami rolled his eyes and quickly flicked a finger over Naruto's nose. "I just told you you're not stupid, you dimwit." Yami blinked at what he just said, but moved on as if nothing had happened. However, you do have problems with listening to others and keeping focus. Luckily for you, that won't be an issue anymore. I've been paying attention to the things you haven't for a long time, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. And now you don't need to look for other people's attention, because you have mine." Before Naruto could answer, he felt arms wrap around his waist and a body pressing to his back. "You have ours," he heard Naruto's voice coming from his shoulder where she rested her head. Naruto could barely hold it anymore and felt wetness streaming from his eyes. Damn it, in the past 2 days he had cried more than he had in the past 5 years. He didn't want to show them that and immediately lifted his hands to his face to wipe the tears. They never reached, however. Naruto had grabbed his wrists and was pulling them back down. "It's okay to cry when you're happy," she said, leaning her head to his. "Are you?" Naruto had imagined on occasions what it'd be like to hear someone tell him they were there for him. They were fantasies entertained during the darker hours of the night when he had a particularly nasty nightmare or just couldn't sleep. He had deemed it all right to think such thoughts then, because he could pretend they were just dreams in the morning. Those fantasies could not compare to the real thing, to what he was experiencing right now. He wasn't good with words, but even if he possessed Yami's vocabulary, he doubted he'd be able to describe how happy he was. So he just settled for choking out a simple, "yes," and leaning on Naruto, who moved her arms around him again. Yami smiled as well, before he caught himself and turned his face away with a snort. Fortunately for him, they hadn't caught his smile this time. His thoughts went back to the question at hand. He wasn't even sure what the right question was. How had the Naruto's clothes dispelled with her? They were real clothes, bought with money, not chakra constructs. And how did she appear with them? No, those weren't the right questions. They were the obvious ones, but he was searching for something else. He walked to the window and looked out at the village. He thought for a while in relative silence, since Naruto had also started crying while smiling like the airhead she was. He understood their feelings very well, since he also held them, somewhere deep inside. However, he wasn't one to express himself so openly. He hoped he had an understanding with them. They dealt with the emotional stuff for him, while he took care of the actual thinking. So what was the right question then? How was it even possible? No, in this world, where giant chakra beasts existed and were sealed in little children, that wasn't the right question. Besides, the answer was easy, obvious, and not a real answer, with chakra. He needed to start at the very beginning. What is the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu? What is its purpose? Why create a solid clone purely out of chakra, when you could make clones using some sort of element, like earth and water? They had studied about the different variations and uses in the academy. The Bunshin no Jutsu, one, was taught so they could learn the concept of projecting their image, in case one day they would learn some sort of clone technique. Wait, the Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tobirama, was the creator. But why did he feel the need to create such a technique? From the academy, they had learned about him and his abilities. It was a lesson that even Naruto had paid attention to. It was about a previous Hokage after all. Back then he needed to know who exactly he was going to surpass. He was an expert user of water-style jutsu. In fact, he was so proficient that he didn't need an existing body of water to form any techniques. He extracted water from the atmosphere itself. So he shouldn't have had a need for another clone technique when he could just make them out of water like it was nothing. In that case, the question was, what was the difference between clone techniques that created a body using chakra and some sort of element, and the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which created solid clones purely out of chakra? Yami had the feeling this wasn't the right question either, and finding the answer would probably lead to another question. But it was a start. He turned back around and said, "Are you two done? 'Cause we still have stuff to do." "Thanks, I try my best. My goal is to one day turn it into an art form," Yami said with a wicked grin. Naruto huffed and turned her head to the side, her delicate lips forming a pout. Naruto took the time of their little banter exchange to wipe his cheeks and eyes of any traces of leftover tears and quickly composed himself. Happiness or not, that's enough crying for now, he mentally promised himself and looked at Yami. "All right, I've thought about the whole thing with Naruto," Yami said, making the others lean slightly in expectation. He paused for the sake of suspense, intentionally drawing them further by saying, "It's simple actually." He made another pause, taking the time to look meaningfully at their faces, implying whatever would be said next was of great importance. He drew a huge breath, just to wind the tension in their backs further, and fired the next sentence with as much speed as he could, "I've got nothing." A pair of huge thuds were heard as both Naruto and Naruko had a close encounter with the floor. There was another, much softer thud following theirs, this time courtesy of Yami, who was cackling like mad and rolling on the floor. "You," Naruto uttered after he stood up, trying his best not to inflict a flying elbow on his counterpart. One punch. Just one in that mug of his, hopefully with enough force to at least dislodge a tooth. That's all he wanted. You should have seen your faces. It's the simple things that make life truly enjoyable, he chuckled darkly before he settled in an evil smirk. Oh wait, you will see them later when you dispel me. You'd be able to appreciate the humor then, I'm sure. Naruto's fist started to itch. He was about to seriously jump Yami, but something made him pause. It was Naruko. And it wasn't her trying to stop him directly. She hadn't even said anything to him. It was her actions. She slowly stood up from the ground and dusted herself, every movement of her body taken with precise measure and attentiveness. She then gently sat on the couch and placed her palms on her lap, before directing the most impassive, the most innocent, the most serene look both boys had ever seen on a female at Yami. Naruto swallowed audibly at the scene, and he wasn't even the current object of her attention. Yami thought it'd be best to continue on the topic and hopefully distract Naruto from whatever thoughts he was a focus of. The poor, delusional soul. In all seriousness, I have an idea of what we need to do. But first, let me start by saying this. I may seem smarter than you two or more knowledgeable about some things, but I definitely don't know everything or have all the answers. I've learned most of the lessons Naruto has ignored from the academy, because it's what I do. But that's it. I suspect what happened with Naruto has a lot to do with advanced chakra manipulation and theory. Seeing their lost expressions, he rolled his eyes. I'll explain later, it's not important at the moment. Just know that at this point, we have to start doing research on these kinds of stuff. And the most important thing we need to do is understand the shadow clone jutsu. Understand it? Naruto asked, still somehow managing to keep up. As for Naruko, Yami could already see the faraway look in her eyes. At least they weren't looking at him anymore. Meh, he supposed it was fine, as long as Naruto paid attention. If he had the knowledge, every one of them would have it technically. Yes, for starters, the difference between the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and other clone techniques. The best way would probably be having another peek at the Forbidden Scroll, Yami said. We could go ask the old man to let us, Naruto suggested. No, I think it's a bad idea. I've told you before, I don't trust him. Whatever you may think he's done for us in the past doesn't matter from the moment we've learned he's been lying to us. In the end, he's the Hokage, his priority is the village, Yami said with a sense of finality. Naruto wanted to protest. He wanted to believe in the old man. But Yami was right. He had asked the Hokage many times if he knew the reason people hated him. What else had the old man lied about? His parents? Naruto immediately cut the train of thought there. Now wasn't the time. He hoped the time would never come, even if deep down he knew it would. So what do? We can't keep this a secret forever, especially if I'll be taking care of groceries in our apartment. And I'm not going to let Naruto do missions by himself. Naruko spoke for the first time since the discussion began in a suspiciously calm and businesslike voice. She didn't even bother acknowledging Yami with a look, instead directing one at Naruto while biting her lower lip in worry. Of course we can't keep it a secret forever. Tomorrow, Naruto has to get his picture taken for his ninja registration papers. The day after tomorrow is the graduation ceremony. This gives us 2 days. I don't know what happens after the ceremony and after we become official genin, too. However, we should assume that our little family will become known. If there are any problems with the Hokage, then I'll deal with them. But until that time comes, we have to experiment and discover as much as possible by ourselves. Also, Naruto, you need to train. Yami looked at the creator. Huh? Naruto asked, lifting an eyebrow at his counterpart. It's simple, by improving yourself, you'll also improve us and any other clones you make. So by completing training exercises you're also making us stronger, Yami explained. What about us? What if we train as well? Naruko asked, wanting to be useful in any way she could. Nah, I don't think it will help much. The only training that would matter is Naruto's, since he's our creator. Yami dismissed the idea. Clones training, what a stupid concept. It was definitely worthy of being one of Naruto's ideas. However, there was a really tiny voice in the back of his mind that was screaming he was missing something. There was something here. Actually, I need to think about that. We'll consider it later, first we need to start with the basics. He looked at Naruto. That means looking at ourselves and thinking about our strengths and weaknesses. You can do that somewhere else, Naruto spoke and stood up. She brushed a hand through her bangs and scrunched her eyes in the thoughtful expression that was basically a family trait for the Uzumakis now. I need to make a list, buy groceries and cleaning supplies, and some essentials for myself. Then I'll need to come back, arrange things and get some cleaning done before I have to start cooking dinner. Oh, if I'm going to cook proper meals from now on, that means buying some cookbooks and learning recipes too. You need help with the groceries? Naruto offered, but his female clone just waved him off. No, you go train or whatever. If I need help, I can make clones. That's not a good idea at the moment, Yami said. He got a look from Naruto, but surprisingly not Naruto. She didn't give any indication that she heard him and didn't say anything either. Why's that? Naruto asked. We don't know what happens if we try to make clones. Will we be able to make copies of ourselves or will they be copies of you? Or will we get an entirely different result? This requires some careful experimentation which we'll head out to do. But for now, Naruto, make 3 clones, just regular ones. Naruto just shrugged and did as he was told. 3 puffs of smoke later and there were 3 copies of himself in his living room. Okay, you 3 will assist Naruto. You are to do as she says and you're also going to pay for everything she tells you to. For that reason you'll use the Henge no Jutsu, 3, to turn into someone else. We don't want people to somehow link 3 exact copies of Naruto paying for products and then money disappearing. They'll make the connection simply because they hate us. Yami gave them instructions. The 3 clones nodded before making a hand seal. Henge no Jutsu. 3 voices said and the clones were enveloped in a cloud of smoke each. After they dissipated, the clones had changed into 3 relatively generic faces from the population. There were 2 boys and 1 girl. One of the boys had long straight black hair tied in a low ponytail with dark eyes, while the other had a messy chocolate brown hair with green eyes. The girl had strawberry blonde wavy hair that reached just after her shoulder blades and chocolate eyes. The whisker marks were missing from their cheeks and their clothes had changed to various shades of colors, without an ounce of orange, blue or black. Yami looked at them critically, but found no faults. Those are pretty good generic transformations. No one will think of us or the clones when money disappears. At his words, the clones took out their wallets and offered them to Naruto. Yami was surprised to note the wallets had changed as well. The clones had shown a surprising amount of foresight. Aloud he said, "No, keep the wallets. You'll be paying for whatever things each of you buys." "Oh," came from Naruto as she put a hand in her apron pocket and took out the familiar Gamma-chan. "It seems I got one this time as well." Yami didn't bother to even think about it. They would get answers in due time. So what am I supposed to call them? Naruto looked at them thoughtfully, tapping a finger over her delicate lips. "Whatever you want. They're just generic clones, they don't have any special personalities and don't need names," Yami said. "Yeah, but I need to be able to address them if something happens," Naruto said, giving Yami a surprisingly even and malicious-free look. That put him even more on edge. He couldn't help but think she was plotting something in that pretty little head of hers. Even if she was a bimbo, she was still a product of Naruto, which meant she possessed enough intelligence and proficiency with pulling pranks to cause some sort of mischief. "How about generic errand minions?" Naruto offered, completely unaware of what was happening between the two of them. Both Yami and Naruto thought about it until the girl clone said, "Gems? I like it. So GEM 1, 2 and 3? She counted, assigning a number to each one of the clones. Yami just shrugged, "Good enough, just don't give them proper names," while Naruto had a huge grin plastered on his face. It was nice to have someone like his ideas for a change. "Oh, there's something very important. Do not let them dispel, not at least until we're all back home," Yami said. "What? But they'll get in my way when I try to clean," Naruto said, annoyed. "Or you could use them for something. If there isn't anything, you can just lock them on the balcony until we come back," Yami suggested, before explaining his reasoning. "They'll be out and about for the rest of the day while they're helping you, so I want them to dispel in a controlled environment, meaning all of us present at home." I don't want Naruto getting any unnecessary feedback. Hey, I can handle it. Naruto protested. He didn't need any babying. Maybe, but I don't want to risk you passing out in the middle of the street. Not to mention I don't know what would happen to me and Naruto if you do pass out. Would we dispel as well? And if we do, what if there's something important going on, like Naruto cooking? If we're not careful, we might get into serious trouble, Yami explained. Naruto let out a huff and crossed his arms at his chest. You worry too much, he said. Fine, we'll do it your way. He closed his eyes in annoyance and turned away. Then he felt a light touch on his shoulder and opened them to see Naruto's hand there. We worry because you tend to overdo things a bit too often, she told him with a wink. Well, I guess technically we all do. But you wouldn't want to do that tonight. I'm planning on making many different things for dinner. Having someone being concerned for me for a change isn't so bad, Naruto thought with a smile, which only grew wider, especially if they'll prepare homemade dinner too. Now he couldn't wait for tonight. It would be the first time he'd have a home-cooked dinner in his life. Instant ramen cannot be considered as a real homemade meal, even if it was technically god food. He'd eat it even if it was slightly crunchy with unidentified bits in it. All right, I promise to be careful, Naruto said excitedly and gave her a huge grin. Good, Naruto had a smile of her own. Now scram, she playfully pushed him away and giggled. Wait Naruto, go get your ninja gear, we'll need it, Yami said. Naruto just nodded and went to his room with Yami following him. The original wrapped a white bandage around his right thigh and then put his kunai holster there. He also took his belt and strapped his ninja pouch, so it was positioned at his right hip. Done, he said. Where's your forehead protector? Yami asked him. Ah, I want to save it for the graduation ceremony, Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. Naruto, we're officially ninja now. Even if I don't like the village, we earned the protector and we should wear it. Besides, I want us to go to a training ground and if we wear it people won't bother us. Hopefully, Yami explained. Fine, Naruto sighed and tied the forehead protector on his forehead. There, happy now? Wait, what about you? Won't you need the gear or the protector? Yami considered it. You're right, me and Naruto should have those as well. Okay, time to test something again. The two of us will dispel and then you'll summon us once more. With that they returned to the living room and after saying the same to Naruto the two aspects dispelled. Yami opened his eyes. He was standing in front of his door, back in Naruto's mindscape. He heard footsteps quickly approaching from behind and turned around. He couldn't react in time to prevent the incredibly fast, painful and loud slap he felt imprinted on his cheek. Before he could even do or say anything to Naruto, he was summoned back. After he summoned Yami, Naruto did the same for Naruto. He waited for the puffs of smoke to dissipate and could not help his eyebrows almost relocating to his hair from surprise. Yami was rubbing his left cheek, where he had an open-handed and very red imprint made from what looked like a delicate and feminine-looking right hand. He then looked at Naruto, who was rubbing her delicate, feminine right hand with a slightly pained expression. What happened to you two? You didn't need to be a genius to see the answer to that question, but he couldn't help himself from asking. Besides, he wanted the details. Yami opened his mouth first to explain and paused for a bit, before continuing, fell down some stairs. He fell down some stairs, Naruto confirmed, almost immediately after him. Really? Naruto drawled, unable to contain his smile. Funny, I don't remember seeing any stairs. I'll show you next time we go in your mind. Yami's voice held promise that there would be more than just showing him the stairs in question. They hinted there might be some pushing involved in the process too. However, all three of them were sharing the same thought at that exact same moment. So, whatever bodily injuries someone gets in our mind get transferred in the real world when they're summoned. Interesting. All three of them shared a chuckle at this realization and immediately after, all three of them realized the other two had shared the same discovery. This particular episode would later on come to be known as the beginning of the Cold Clone Wars. Seems like it worked, Naruto said finally. Yami looked exactly like him, well, minus the eyes. He had the leaf forehead protector tied around his forehead and the kunai holster and weapon pouch at their proper places. Naruto however tugged her forehead protector with a slight frown. It didn't feel right on her forehead like that for some reason. She went to the mirror to take a proper look at herself. Yeah, we should get going, Yami said, still rubbing his cheek and headed for the door. All right. Naruto followed him excitedly and waved at Naruto on his way out. See ya tonight, Naruto. Bye. Naruto waved absent-mindedly as she turned around. No, this wouldn't work at all. She took off her forehead protector and tied it around her neck. It was better, but not by much. It was still that horrible blue color. Maybe she could somehow turn it into a choker, like the ones Naruto had seen in that Maid magazine while he was developing the technique. Yes, that would look pretty cute. Her eyes went to her waist where the weapon pouch was clinging on one of the apron straps. That didn't look so bad, but she would definitely need to get a different color. Either black or orange, maybe a smaller one, or a set of two smaller ones that could be better for organizing things. Lastly, her gaze settled on the kunai pouch. It was black in color, so it matched her outfit somewhat, but it was those horrible bandages that were tied over her pretty stocking that ruined it all. She reached for the holster and took out a kunai. These were standard issue, which were perfect for Naruto, however they didn't feel right in her slimmer hands. Maybe she should get the smaller ones. They weren't great when it came to close-quarter combat, but were easier to throw and harder to deflect. She could also incorporate them somehow in the skirt portion of her dress. Then an idea hit what she could do with the holster and she let a girlish squeal out. She would talk to Naruto later. Finally tearing her eyes from the mirror, her mind settled on the task at hand. First, she needed supplies and lots of them. She took an empty scroll that was lying open on the floor and settled on the table. She tore off 4 large pieces and started writing on them, making 4 different lists. She finished after a bit and inspected them one last time before she nodded to herself. She was sure there would be more things that would come up, but this was fine for starters. All right, she stood up and looked at the 3 gems that were standing near the window. It just now occurred to her that they haven't moved at all from their places since the moment they had been summoned. She could see 2 of them grinning, probably still thinking about the earlier situation with Jerkface. The third one was looking at the sky through the window. Come on gems, we should get going. Naruto told them and pocketed the lists from the table before she headed for the door. Yami could barely contain himself anymore. He felt his fists trembling, but just kept clenching them. He spared a glance at Naruto and felt his face frowning even more. Naruto was fine, or so it seemed at first glance. He just kept walking with his hands behind his head, smiling to himself, as if having fun with some joke that was playing in his mind and completely ignoring the cold looks or glares from the people around him. And that was Yami's problem. Unlike Naruto, he couldn't ignore. His mind automatically registered the looks, the body language and the not-so-subtle discussions that were going behind their backs. Earlier, while they were going to Orange World, it hadn't been a problem. He was busy explaining some things about language to Naruto and the store itself was located relatively close to their home. They had taken the route through the back alleys and had met as few people as possible. Now however, they were going through some of the busier streets and there was no discussion to take his mind off of things. Not that it would anyway. He felt his hand reach for his kunai holster when 2 old geezers had whispered some particularly vicious words while shaking their heads and grunting. It shouldn't be a problem, right? No one would actually miss bastards like them. His finger was touching the cold metal of the finger hole when he stopped himself. No, this wasn't right. Killing 2 geezers would accomplish nothing. His hand moved towards his weapon pouch where he kept his explosive notes. Blowing up the entire street, however, that would definitely get results. Hey Yami, Naruto's concerned voice snapped his attention away from the screams of terror his mind had already been imagining. Are you okay? You look really tense. Yami met Naruto's eyes and tried calming down a bit. He hadn't realized it, but when he had stopped reaching for the kunai, he had stopped walking as well. That was close, he had almost snapped. He carefully let go of the explosive note and took his hand out of the pouch. Stressed, he grunted out, not trusting his voice to say anything more. There was a huge possibility he'd start screaming and yelling at everyone around them, and that fell in the category of things not to do while you want to keep a low profile from the old man. Naruto kept looking at him, his concern increasing by the second. He had never seen Yami like that. He wondered what was causing it, until he looked around and realization hit him with the weight of an anvil. He knew how to ignore, he had done it for years. Yami however existed because he ignored, which naturally meant Yami couldn't ignore, no matter how much he wanted. He placed a hand on Yami's shoulder, and the fact his red-eyed clone didn't push it away all but confirmed his suspicions. Yami wasn't big on close contact. "It's the glares, isn't it? And the whispers?" Naruto asked, and this time didn't even receive a proper word, just another grunt with a barely perceptible nod. "Come on, let's take to the roofs, we'll get to the training ground faster anyway." Yami barely nodded again, and both boys gathered chakra at their feet. It was one of the useful skills taught in the academy. It allowed ninja to move faster and leap at great distances. It was useful for jumping from tree to tree and roof to roof. Naruto was surprised at the speed they were moving with and had to gather more chakra for bigger leaps to keep up with Yami. They finally reached their destination, which was one of the smaller training grounds in the outskirts of the village. It had a large grassy field, surrounded by trees on three sides. There were a couple of big wooden posts, some straw dummies, and a few targets spread around the grass and hanging from the trees. They landed on the outskirts, but Yami took 2 more leaps before he reached the middle of the field, where he fell on his knees and started breathing harshly. "Yami!" Naruto shouted and tried touching his shoulder. His hand was swatted away by Yami. "Don't touch me!" Yami spat out with venom lacing his voice. Naruto hesitated for a moment before moving close and wrapping him in a hug. Yami growled louder, "I told you not to touch me," and punched Naruto in the stomach with everything he could manage. Naruto had to muster every ounce of his will not to double over. It was stupid, he should have expected as much, but he wasn't prepared for the blow. He would have tensed his muscles otherwise. He felt tears gather in the corner of his eyes from the intense pain but refused to let go. "No, you don't have to deal with this alone anymore," Naruto managed out. "You said it yourself, we're in this together, you, me, and Naruto. You're not alone, Yami." Yami let out a sound that was a mixture of growling and snorting, but thankfully stopped trying to squirm away from Naruto. He didn't have the strength anymore for some reason. He didn't return the embrace, but his creator could feel him starting to relax. "I hate them so much," Yami barely muttered, but Naruto caught it nevertheless and replied, "I know." It took a bit of time, but Yami's breathing slowly started to calm down. He felt better now. He wasn't sure if it was because of Naruto or... No, this wasn't right. Of course it was because of Naruto. And the airheaded bimbo to an extent. It wasn't right of him to ignore that. After all, he was the aspect of Naruto's personality that wasn't supposed to ignore things. He wasn't going to start doing it now. "Naruto," he whispered out finally, "Thank you. Of course, that's what family's for," Naruto said with a smile. Yami let out a snort, but the corners of his lips twitched upwards as well. They stayed like this for a few more seconds, before his smile turned into an evil smirk. "You can let me go now," he said, barely keeping the amusement from his voice. "I know I'm attractive and you can't keep your hands off of me, but unfortunately for you, I don't swing that way." Ew. Naruto was so fast in moving, it almost seemed like he teleported a meter away. "That's so gross. And I like girls." "Ah, I thought so, you were really touchy with Naruto earlier. I had to practically tear you off of each other," Yami kept snickering. Naruto was just too easy to fluster and he wasn't going to let an opportunity like this go to waste. "What?" Naruto said, flabbergasted with eyes as wide as saucers, "But, he started stammering. Yami took a bit of pity on him and decided to let him off the hook. For now. He still owed him for the earlier comfort after all. Wasn't he such a nice guy? All right. Let's get down to business. We need to do a few tests with the shadow clones. First, I want you to start by making 2, Yami instructed. Naruto nodded, glad to get away from that particular topic. He put his fingers in the familiar cross-shaped sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There were 3 puffs of smoke and 3 clones appeared. Yami hummed thoughtfully. I tried making 2, sorry, Naruto muttered. It's fine, chakra control is something we need to work on anyway, this just confirms it, Yami waved him off. It's not bad actually, we can use this. He pointed at one of the clones. Come here. When the clone did so, Yami looked at the other 2, now, me, Naruto and this clone are going to turn around. I want you 2 to play a round of rock paper scissors and then dispel, alright? The 2 remaining clones answered with a nod each. Oh, and Naruto. And gems I suppose. If you get these memories and any future ones, ignore them. We're going to be testing and practicing with the shadow clone technique. Now, let's turn around. He did so and motioned for Naruto and the third clone to do the same. The other two clones looked at each other, shrugged and did as they were instructed. Rock, paper, scissors. 1, 2, 3, go. Both chanted loudly and dispelled after finishing the game. Immediately, the three blondes that were left on the field were assaulted with memories. For Naruto and the third clone, things were simple. They saw one of the clones winning with rock. It was different for Yami, however. He received all of Naruto's memories since the moment they had left the apartment, including his little episode. He couldn't help letting out a groan. He didn't want the airhead seeing that. Oh well, what was done was done. This was actually really informative and important. He turned to the third clone. Did you get the memories? Yep, I saw one of them winning with rock, the clone replied. Yami looked at Naruto, who just nodded. Okay, now it's my turn, Yami said and made the cross-shaped seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There were another 3 puffs of smoke and 3 more clones appeared. These ones, however, definitely belonged to Yami. They shared his eyes. Yami hummed again. Interesting, so when we use it, we make copies of ourselves, instead of regular clones. I wonder if we'd be able to make copies of each other with enough training. I guess we'll have to test more later. Okay, same thing, you come over here. He pointed at one of his clones, and you two will play rock paper scissors when we turn our backs and dispel again. He instructed and everyone did as they were told. After Yami's clones disappeared, the now 4 blondes were hit with memories again. Yami and his copy got the simple memory of seeing how one of the clones won with scissors. Naruto and his clone, however, got all of Yami's memories since he had been remade at the apartment. So? Yami asked. One of them won with scissors, his clone said, and Yami looked at Naruto's clone. He looked at him with slightly wide eyes and responded, I saw the same but what? Yami asked. But we also saw your memories since I summoned you in the apartment, Naruto continued, with unease. Right, Yami nodded. I figured that would happen. Yami. Naruto began, but hesitated. What was he supposed to say? He had felt Yami's memories and feelings. And he knew he was to blame for all that hate and pain. He had been ignoring his own feelings, and because of that. It's fine, Yami waved it off. No, it's not. It's because of me. Naruto, Yami cut him off. What you do is normal. It's how you cope with everything. Anyone in your position would have a coping mechanism. Don't blame yourself. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and squeezed it a bit. Besides, it's my purpose, it's the reason I exist. Despite everything, I'm alright with it. Otherwise I'd be denying my own existence. He smiled slightly, and you said it too, I have you and Naruto. You make it bearable and worth it. Yami looked away. Just don't tell her I said that. Naruto let out a laugh before he settled on a huge happy grin. It's nice to hear you admit that. I won't, but you should tell her, she'll be happy. I have my reasons, Yami said. Anyway, let's keep going. You two, he pointed at the last remaining clones, his and Naruto's. Do the same after we turn around. Play rock paper scissors and dispel yourselves. The clones did so and Naruto and Yami were hit with the memories. A draw with paper, Naruto grinned, holding the back of his head with his hands. Yami, however, was clutching his head. He was so stupid. Of course this would happen. When the clones dispelled, he got the memories of the result. And the memories of the clones, hearing his and Naruto's conversation. So now the bimbo would know what he had said. You okay, Yami? Naruto asked with a bit of concern. Was the mental exhaustion too much? Oh yeah, I'm okay. I was just focusing on the memories. Yami released his head and let out a sigh. He could picture Naruto's knowing look already. What Naruto said next snapped him from his musings, however. I didn't get any extra memories this time. You know, the ones I got before. What? Yami said, but his mind was already racing. You know, I didn't get all your memories since I summoned you from the apartment. Just the memories of the game and our conversation, Naruto explained. Yami kept quiet for a bit and finally said, all right, this may be confusing, so I'll do my best to explain it simply. I'm not even sure I got everything right myself, but I think I do. Yami looked at Naruto and received a concentrated look for a response. Or as concentrated as it would get anyway. We just had 3 pairs of our clones play rock paper scissors and dispel, right? The first pair consisted only of your clones, so when they dispelled, I received all of your memories from the moment you made me in the apartment, before we left. The second pair of clones were my clones, and when they dispelled, you received all of my memories from the moment I was summoned in your apartment, before we just left. Do you follow so far? Naruto nodded. It was simple enough so far. Okay, here is where it gets tricky. The last pair of clones consisted of a clone each, one of yours and one of mine. The memories I received from your clone and the ones you received from mine were from the moment I was summoned as well. Wait, that's not true, I only got the new memories, Naruto said, confused. No, that's what our mind thinks. But because we already received the memories once before, when we got them the second time they just overlapped and our brain ignored them and all of the mental stress. Yami explained and waited for Naruto's response. Naruto scrunched his eyes and thought about it seriously before he hesitantly said, so when the last clones dispelled. Technically we just got their newest memories, not the ones we already had? Yep, which is huge, Yami said enthusiastically. Naruto didn't follow, but he decided to wait for the explanation. He was sure one would come and he wasn't disappointed. Basically, we can space out the intake of memories and the mental exhaustion that comes with them. Let's say if me and Naruto create and dispel a clone every 2 hours, you'll get our memories for those 2 hours. Then you can take some time to let your mind rest and absorb the information, before moving on with whatever you were doing, and in another 2 hours we would do the same thing. Of course, this needs testing and I'm not sure what would happen in combat situations. But now we have a basis. Yami said, unusually happy. Naruto guessed it was because he was smart and he had made some smart discovery. He didn't get everything completely, but he was more of a hands-on guy. He was sure he'd get the whole theory behind it eventually with enough practice. I'll think about making some sort of schedule tonight. For now, let's try pushing the limits. Or at least locating them. Start by making 10 clones. You'll spar with them one-on-one until they're all gone and you'll make more. What's the purpose of that? Naruto asked. Training, Yami said simply. Training your hand-to-hand combat, training your stamina, and I guess training your mental strength as well. I told you, the more you train, the stronger we become, not just you. In essence, our lives are tied to yours. If you die, we die as well, so we are all reliant on your strength to survive. Naruto's eyes widened at that explanation. He had never even thought of that. Even if they were aspects of him, Yami and Naruto had established themselves in his life as his closest and most important people. And they were entirely dependent on him. His chest swelled with newfound resolve and determination. He would train, 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 and train until he passed out. He would become strong enough to keep himself safe and by proxy them as well. He would do his best to protect the small happiness that had finally started to blossom in their life. He brought his hands in the cross-shaped hand sign and yelled, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He felt the familiar energy of chakra release emanate from his body along with another familiar feeling. Yet, instead of the 10 clones he had wanted to make, only one appeared. Naruto, Yami groaned and pinched the bridge of his nose. Maybe we should start with chakra control. But, I poured enough chakra for at least 10 clones. Naruto defended himself. Then why is there only one here? Yami waved at the clone, who seemed to have taken the gesture as his cue. He straightened his back and waved at them with a serious expression. Greetings. The new arrival almost yelled with enthusiasm dripping from his voice. Now both Naruto and Yami were quiet and looking at the clone. This was a very uncharacteristic thing of Naruto or a clone of him to say. In fact, they had never used that word. They, or technically Naruto, had only heard it from grown-ups when he was younger. Yami was the first to say something. Naruto, did you make another one? To outsiders, the question would have probably been silly. Another one what? Clone. Well, obviously. But Yami had meant something else entirely. Now Naruto could identify the second feeling he had felt before he had summoned the clone. It was the same secondary feeling he had felt right before he had summoned Yami and Naruto. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Whoops. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.